What the hell are you doing in my neighborhood, boy? Officer Bradley Mitchell's voice ripped through the afternoon air as he burst from his patrol car, hand already on his weapon. The pristine colonial home behind him showcased a perfect birthday scene. Pink balloons, laughing children, and families in designer clothes celebrating on manicured lawns worth millions. The tall black man in pressed khakis froze while adjusting a happy 8th birthday Sarah banner. "Officer, what's the problem? This is my—" "Shut your lying mouth!" Mitchell roared, deliberately spitting a thick glob directly at the man's feet. "Your home? In Willowbrook Heights?" His laugh was harsh and bitter. "Right, and I'm the president." He kicked over a decorative planter, soil exploding across the spotless driveway. Vanilla cake scented the air, designer perfume mixed with fear. Behind crystal windows, wealthy neighbors watched the spectacle unfold. Radio static crackled as backup screamed toward the scene. Little did Mitchell know he was about to handcuff the one man who could destroy his entire career with a single phone call. 2 hours earlier, the Sterling family home had been a picture of suburban perfection. Colonel David Sterling stood in his backyard, adjusting the final string of lights around the patio while the smell of grilled burgers filled the warm afternoon air. His military bearing was unmistakable, shoulders squared, movements precise, every detail planned to perfection. "Daddy, does this look right?" 8-year-old Sarah bounced toward him, her pigtails dancing as she carried a handmade banner reading, "Science is cool," in glittery purple letters. Her gap-toothed smile radiated pure joy as she pointed to where she'd hung it between 2 oak trees. David's face softened as he knelt to her level. "It looks absolutely perfect, sweetheart, just like you." The pride in his voice was unmistakable as he straightened the banner's corners. Sarah giggled and ran back toward the house where her mother was arranging cupcakes shaped like rockets and planets. Dr. Maya Sterling emerged from the kitchen carrying a 3-tiered birthday cake, her scrubs traded for an elegant sundress. The afternoon light caught the diamond studs in her ears, a gift from David after her promotion to chief of pediatric surgery. "The Hendersons just called," she said, setting the cake on the decorated table. "Little Emma's excited about the telescope demonstration you planned." David nodded, glancing toward his study window where his military commendations hung in neat rows. 23 years of service to his country, culminating in his current position as Director of Domestic Security at the Pentagon. Few people knew that the quiet family man grilling hamburgers controlled a $2.3 billion budget that funded local law enforcement across America. The neighborhood around them told its own story. Willowbrook Heights stretched in every direction, a fortress of privilege where median home values topped $800,000, and the demographic was 98% white. Pristine lawns stretched like green carpets between colonial mansions, each driveway occupied by luxury SUVs and European sedans. The Sterling house stood modest among these giants, but David had chosen it carefully. After years of military housing and overseas deployments, he wanted Sarah to grow up somewhere safe, where education was prioritized and opportunities were endless. The irony wasn't lost on him that his Pentagon salary made him wealthier than most of his neighbors, yet his skin color made him perpetually suspect. "Mr. Sterling," called Jennifer Martinez, Sarah's teacher, as she approached with her own daughter in tow. "Thank you so much for inviting Sophia. She hasn't stopped talking about this party all week." The Hispanic woman's smile was genuine, but David noticed how her voice carried just slightly too loud, the careful pronunciation of someone ensuring she belonged. David shook her hand warmly. "Sarah specifically requested Sophia be here. They're quite the team in that science club." He watched as more families arrived, a carefully curated mix that reflected Sarah's diverse classroom rather than the neighborhood's homogeneous reality. The Washingtons pulled up in their Tesla, Dr. Michael Washington, a cardiologist, and his wife Lisa, a federal prosecutor. Their twin boys tumbled out of the car carrying wrapped gifts, their laughter mixing with the growing chorus of children's voices. David felt a familiar weight as he watched other black families navigate the social dynamics. The extra politeness, the careful enunciation, the unspoken pressure to represent their entire race flawlessly. "Beautiful setup, David," called Robert Carter, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as his daughter ran to join the group. As Boeing's lead engineer on the new fighter jet project, Carter understood the unique position they all occupied, successful professionals whose very presence challenged certain assumptions about who belonged in spaces like this. The party was in full swing when Mrs. Helen Grayson appeared at her fence line. The 72-year-old widow had lived in Willowbrook Heights for 43 years, watching it transform from the good old days to what she now considered an invasion. Her pale blue eyes surveyed the gathering with barely concealed distaste, lingering on every dark face as if cataloging evidence. "Quite a crowd you've got there," she called over, her voice carrying the particular sweetness that Southern women use to deliver poison. "I do hope you've considered the noise ordinance. Some of us value our peace and quiet." David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady. "Of course, Mrs. Grayson. We'll be wrapping up by 6, well within city guidelines." He turned away before she could respond, but not before catching the calculation in her eyes. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as children ran through the sprinkler, their squeals of delight echoing off the surrounding houses. David stood on his deck, surveying a scene of pure American happiness, unaware that his neighbor was already reaching for her phone. The sirens shattered the peaceful afternoon like glass breaking. David's head snapped up from where he was lighting the birthday candles, his military instincts immediately alert. The sound grew louder, closer, until 2 police cruisers screeched around the corner of Maple Street, their red and blue lights painting angry streaks across the manicured lawns.
"What's happening, Daddy?"
Sarah's voice trembled as she pressed against his leg, her small hand gripping his khakis. The laughter from her friends died abruptly, replaced by confused whispers and the sound of parents gathering their children closer. David's training kicked in automatically. Hands visible, calm demeanor, no sudden movements. He'd briefed countless military personnel on civilian police encounters, but experiencing it firsthand sent ice through his veins. "Stay close to Mommy, baby girl," he murmured, gently guiding Sarah toward Maya. Officer Bradley Mitchell erupted from the lead car like a man possessed, his hand already resting on his weapon. His partner, Officer Janet Pierce, followed more cautiously, her rookie instincts warring with the aggressive energy Mitchell radiated. The afternoon air suddenly felt thick and dangerous. "You!" Mitchell's voice cut across the yard like a whip crack. "Yeah, you're in the fancy shirt. Get over here now." David approached slowly, every movement deliberate and non-threatening. His polo shirt, a birthday gift from Sarah last year, suddenly felt like a costume, as if he were playing dress-up in someone else's life. "Good afternoon, officer. I'm David Sterling. This is my home. How can I help you?" Mitchell's laugh was ugly and sharp. "Your home?" He looked around theatrically, taking in the colonial architecture, the pristine landscaping, the luxury cars and neighboring driveways. "Right, and I'm the Pope." He spat onto the driveway, the sound wet and deliberate. "What's your real story, boy? You hired help? Catering? Lawn service?" The words hit David like physical blows, but his voice remained steady. "I live here with my wife and daughter. We're celebrating Sarah's 8th birthday." He gestured toward the decorations, the cake table, the children who were now staring wide-eyed from behind their parents. "Sarah?" Mitchell's voice dripped with mockery. "Giving the kid a white name won't make you belong here, friend." He stepped closer, invading David's personal space with practiced intimidation. "Let me see some ID. Real ID, not some fake nonsense." David reached slowly into his back pocket, producing his driver's license with the Willowbrook Heights address clearly visible. Mitchell snatched it away, studying it with exaggerated suspicion. "David Sterling, huh? This is your real name, or just what you're going by today?" "That's my legal name, officer. I'm a retired Army colonel currently working as a defense contractor." David kept his voice level, professional, the same tone he used in Pentagon briefings. "Is there a specific complaint you're responding to?" Mitchell's face darkened. "Defense contractor? You expect me to believe that? What kind of defense work does someone like you do, cleaning the bathrooms at the base?" His laughter was harsh and mocking. "Boy, you picked the wrong neighborhood to run your little con game." Behind them, Maya had her phone out, recording discreetly while keeping Sarah close. Other parents were doing the same, their faces a mixture of shock and outrage. Jennifer Martinez whispered urgently into her phone. David caught fragments. "Police harassment," and "You need to see this." "Sir," David said, his military discipline holding his temper in check, "I'm not running any con game. I purchased this home 6 months ago through Willowbrook Realty. I can provide you with documentation if needed. Documentation? Mitchell's voice rose to a near shout. You think some fake papers are going to fool me? I've been working this beat for 15 years. I know every homeowner in this neighborhood, and I sure as hell know you don't belong here. Officer Pierce shifted uncomfortably, her hand resting on her radio. Bradley, maybe we should— Don't you Bradley me, Mitchell snapped without taking his eyes off David. This is exactly the kind of thing that's been ruining neighborhoods like this. These people move in, property values drop. Next thing you know, the whole area's gone to hell. David felt the familiar weight of representing his entire race, the crushing pressure to remain perfect under scrutiny that would destroy a lesser man. His voice stayed calm despite the rage building in his chest. Officer, I understand you're responding to a complaint, but we're within all city ordinances. The party will end by 6 p.m. We have permission for the decorations, and all guests are parked legally. Permission? Mitchell's voice cracked with derision. From who? Your little friends at the community center? He gestured dismissively toward the diverse group of families. Let me guess. You rounded up every minority family in the city to come play pretend in the rich neighborhood. Dr. Washington stepped forward, his medical training overriding his caution. Officer, I'm Dr. Michael Washington. This is completely inappropriate. Mr. Sterling is our neighbor and friend. Mitchell whirled on him. Another one? How many of you people are there? His hand moved closer to his weapon. This looks like some kind of organized gathering to me. Could be gang activity. The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Children began to cry. Parents pulled out phones, some calling lawyers, others streaming live to social media. The hashtags #WillowbrookShame and #JusticeForDavid began trending within minutes. Gang activity? David's voice carried a dangerous edge for the first time. Officer, we're celebrating my daughter's birthday. Look around you. There's a bouncy castle, birthday cake, and 8-year-olds opening presents. Mitchell stepped so close that David could smell the coffee on his breath and see the broken capillaries in his nose. Don't you get smart with me, boy. I don't care what kind of front you're putting on. I know your type. Give you people an inch and you take a mile. The crowd of neighbors was growing. Some watched from their windows, others stood in their driveways, but few spoke up. David recognized the calculus playing out in their minds, the decision between doing what was right and avoiding confrontation. Mrs. Carter broke the silence first. Officer, this is ridiculous. The Sterlings are wonderful neighbors. You're disrupting a child's birthday party. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back, Mitchell barked. This is police business. We received reports of suspicious activity, loud noise, and possible trespassing. Trespassing? Maya's voice cut through the tension like a blade. On our own property? She stepped forward, her surgeon's confidence evident in every movement. I'm Dr. Maya Sterling. This is our home. These are our friends, and you're traumatizing our daughter on her birthday. Mitchell's eyes raked over Maya with unconcealed contempt. Doctor? Right. Let me guess. You're the brain surgeon and he's the rocket scientist? His laugh was ugly. You people really commit to the act, don't you? Sarah began to cry, huge tears rolling down her cheeks as she clung to her mother's dress. The sight of his daughter's terror broke something inside David. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more threat than any shout. Officer Mitchell, he said, reading the name tag with deliberate emphasis. You are frightening my child. You are disrupting a legal gathering on private property, and you are making accusations without evidence or probable cause. Mitchell's face flushed red. Are you threatening me? Did everyone hear that? This suspect just threatened a police officer. He grabbed his radio. Dispatch, I need backup at 1247 Maple Street. Suspect is becoming hostile, possible weapons on the premises. The lie crackled through the radio waves like wildfire. David felt the familiar powerlessness that came with being black in America, but somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered a reminder of who he really was. Additional units began arriving, their sirens adding to the chaos. Mitchell's chest puffed with authority as more officers flanked him. Now we're going to do this properly, he sneered. It was time to make a phone call that would change everything. The wail of additional sirens pierced the air as 3 more patrol cars converged on Maple Street. David watched with growing dread as officers poured out of their vehicles, hands resting on weapons, faces set in hard lines. What had begun as a birthday party was rapidly becoming a siege. Jesus Christ, Mitchell, what's the situation here? Sergeant Rodriguez emerged from the lead backup car, his weathered face scanning the scene with practiced eyes. The smell of burned rubber from the aggressive stops mixed with the sweet scent of birthday cake, creating a surreal atmosphere of celebration turned nightmare. Mitchell straightened, his voice taking on an official tone that barely masked his excitement. Sarge, we've got a Code 2 situation. Suspicious individuals occupying this residence. Possible fraud. Definitely trespassing. The main suspect claims to own the property, but his story doesn't add up. David felt his stomach drop as he watched Mitchell's narrative take shape. Every word was carefully chosen to paint him as a threat, to justify whatever came next. Sergeant Rodriguez, he said, keeping his voice steady and professional. I can assure you there's been a misunderstanding. This is my home, and we're simply celebrating my daughter's birthday. Rodriguez studied David with calculating eyes. Sir, I'm going to need you to remain calm and cooperate fully. Officer Mitchell has extensive experience in this area, and if he says something doesn't look right, we take that seriously. The endorsement hit David like a physical blow. He was watching the system close ranks in real time, watching his word become worthless against the badge. Of course, Sergeant. I'm happy to cooperate. I can provide any documentation you need. Documentation can be forged, Mitchell interjected, his confidence growing with each arriving officer. What I want to know is what you're really doing here. This isn't some innocent birthday party. His eyes swept over the diverse crowd of families. This looks like a coordinated event. Could be casing the neighborhood, planning something bigger. Maya stepped forward, her surgeon's training making her unafraid of authority. This is absolutely ridiculous. I'm Dr. Maya Sterling from Children's Hospital. This is my husband, Colonel David Sterling, and this is our home. You're terrorizing children at a birthday party. Mitchell's laugh was sharp and dismissive. Lady, I don't care what kind of titles you claim to have. I've seen this before. Criminals using fake credentials to gain access to upscale neighborhoods. He turned to his sergeant. I recommend we search the premises. I smell marijuana and there could be weapons or stolen goods inside. The lie was so blatant, so obviously fabricated, that several parents gasped audibly. David felt his military training kick in, his mind automatically cataloging exits, threats, and the positions of innocent bystanders. Sergeant, Officer Mitchell is making false claims. There are no drugs here, no weapons beyond what your officers are carrying, and nothing stolen. This is a children's birthday party. Sir, I'm going to need you to calm down, Rodriguez said, his hand moving to his radio. Your aggressive tone is concerning, especially with children present. David's jaw clenched as he recognized the trap. Stay calm and be labeled suspicious for not showing proper deference. Show any emotion and be labeled aggressive and dangerous. It was a game designed for him to lose. I am calm, Sergeant. I'm simply stating facts. Mitchell sensed an opening and pressed his advantage. He's been argumentative since we arrived, refusing to show proper ID, claiming to own property in this neighborhood, making threats. Each word was delivered with the practiced ease of someone who'd written countless false reports. What threats? Dr. Washington demanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to life and death decisions. We've all been recording this interaction. Mr. Sterling has been nothing but polite and cooperative. Mitchell whirled on him, his face flushing red. Are you interfering with a police investigation? Because that's a felony. His hand dropped to his handcuffs with theatrical menace. Maybe we need to sort out who else here doesn't belong. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a fire. David watched as several of the white parents began quietly gathering their children and leaving, unwilling to risk association with whatever was unfolding. The calculation was cold and familiar, the speed with which support evaporated when real consequences appeared. Officer Pierce approached nervously, her rookie training evident in every movement. Mitchell, shouldn't we verify the homeowner information through dispatch before— Pierce, shut your mouth and learn something, Mitchell snapped, his authority unchallenged among his subordinates. This is how real police work gets done. Not everything's in your textbook. He turned back to David with renewed aggression. Now I'm going to ask you one more time. What are you really doing here? David felt the familiar weight of representing every black man who'd ever been questioned on his own property. Officer Mitchell, I've told you repeatedly, this is my home. My family lives here. We're celebrating my daughter's birthday. I've shown you my identification with this address. I'm not sure what else you need. What I need, Mitchell said, stepping close enough that David could smell the stale coffee on his breath, is for you to stop lying to me. Nobody just moves into Willowbrook Heights. Houses here cost more than you people make in a lifetime. The casual racism hit the crowd like a physical slap. Phones appeared everywhere, recording every word, every gesture. Sarah had retreated to the doorway, her birthday crown askew, watching her father be humiliated by men with badges. "Daddy, I'm scared!" Sarah's voice cut through the adult tension like a knife. She stood in the doorway, still wearing her birthday crown, tears streaming down her 8-year-old face. "Why are the police being mean to you?" Mitchell's face twisted with something approaching pleasure. "Well, look at that. Even the kid knows something's wrong." He took a step toward the house. "I think we need to make sure there aren't any other children being endangered in there. Could be a drug house, could be worse." David moved instinctively to block Mitchell's path. "You are not entering my home without a warrant. That is my constitutional right, and I'm exercising it." "Constitutional rights?" Mitchell's voice rose to a near shout. "Boy, you watch too much TV. This is the real world where real cops deal with real problems." He gestured to the other officers. "We've got probable cause, suspicious behavior, false identification, possible drug activity, and now obstruction of justice." The accusations piled up like kindling on a fire. David recognized the strategy. Overwhelm the target with so many claims that defending against them all became impossible. "Sergeant Rodriguez, these accusations are completely false. I've committed no crime, violated no law, and done nothing but try to give my daughter a birthday party." Rodriguez stepped forward, his face wearing the expression of someone who'd made his decision. "Sir, given the totality of the circumstances and Officer Mitchell's concerns, I'm going to need you to place your hands behind your back." The world seemed to slow down around David. He could hear Sarah crying, could see Maya's face contort with rage and disbelief, could feel the weight of generations of injustice pressing down on his shoulders. But beneath it all, a small voice reminded him that this wasn't over. "Are you arresting me?" he asked quietly. "Detained for investigation," Rodriguez replied, producing handcuffs that gleamed silver in the afternoon sun. "For officer safety and the safety of the community." David's hands moved slowly behind his back. The metal was cold against his wrists, the click of the cuffs echoing like gunshots across the silent neighborhood. Children stared in horror as a decorated military officer was treated like a common criminal. Mitchell couldn't contain his satisfaction. "There we go. Much better." He radioed dispatch with exaggerated officiousness. "Suspect in custody at 1247 Maple Street. Requesting additional units for crowd control and premises search." As David was forced to sit on the curb of his own driveway, handcuffed and humiliated, Maya pulled out her phone with shaking fingers. She scrolled to a contact labeled Emergency Pentagon Direct Line and pressed call. "Maya," David said quietly, his voice carrying a weight she'd learned to recognize over 20 years of marriage. "It's time to make the call." The next few minutes would redefine the meaning of power. Maya's fingers trembled as she dialed the emergency Pentagon number David had made her memorize years ago. The phone rang once, twice, then a crisp voice answered. "Pentagon Emergency Operations Center. This is Colonel Patricia Washington." "General Washington, this is Maya Sterling," she said, her surgeon's training keeping her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "They've arrested David?" The response was immediate and electric. "What? Where? Who arrested Colonel Sterling?" David sat handcuffed on his own driveway, watching Mitchell strut around like a peacock, barking orders to the growing crowd of officers. The irony wasn't lost on him. The man celebrating his arrest had no idea he'd just detained the Pentagon official who controlled his department's federal funding. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to end that call immediately," Rodriguez commanded, but Maya had already moved beyond his reach, the phone pressed tightly to her ear. "General, we're at our home in Willowbrook Heights. Officer Bradley Mitchell of the local police has David in handcuffs, claiming he doesn't belong in our neighborhood. They're threatening to search our house." The silence on the other end lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then General Washington's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Give me your exact address. Do not hang up this phone." Mitchell was busy orchestrating his show of force, directing officers to secure the perimeter and prepare for what he called a thorough investigation. He noticed Maya on the phone and marched over with renewed authority. "Lady, I told you to end that call. You're interfering with an active investigation." He reached for her phone, but Maya stepped back. "I'm speaking with Pentagon Emergency Operations," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "General Washington wants to speak with whoever's in charge here." Mitchell's laugh was harsh and dismissive. "Pentagon? Right. And I'm talking to the president." He gestured to Pierce. "Take the phone from her. She's obviously calling her drug dealer or something." But General Washington's voice carried clearly through the speaker. "This is Brigadier General Patricia Washington, Pentagon Emergency Operations. I need to speak with the senior officer on scene immediately." The color began to drain from Mitchell's face, but his arrogance held firm. "Look, lady, I don't know what kind of scam you're running, but—" "Officer!" The voice that cut through the air belonged to Chief of Police Harold Harrison, who had just arrived on scene. His face was pale, his hands shaking as he approached the group. Behind him, 2 black SUVs with government plates pulled up to the curb. "Chief?" Rodriguez looked confused. "What are you doing here?" Harrison's voice was barely above a whisper. "I just received a call from the Secretary of Defense. We need to release Mr. Sterling immediately." Mitchell's world began to tilt. "Chief, I don't understand. This man is obviously—" "Colonel David Sterling," Harrison interrupted, his voice gaining strength, "is the Director of Domestic Security at the Pentagon. He controls the federal funding for our entire department." The words hit Mitchell like physical blows. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly as the implications crashed over him like a tsunami. The man he'd been humiliating, the man sitting handcuffed on the curb, wasn't just some random black man trying to infiltrate a white neighborhood. He was the single most powerful person in law enforcement funding for the entire region. David's voice was calm, almost conversational as he remained seated on the curb. "Officer Mitchell, I want you to understand something. The $50 million in federal grants your department received last year, I signed off on those. The anti-terrorism training budget. That's mine too. The new equipment, the overtime funding, the community policing initiatives, all of it flows through my office." Mitchell's legs felt weak. He looked around desperately for support but found only horror-stricken faces. Rodriguez had gone pale. Pierce looked like she might be sick. From his seated position, still handcuffed, David continued with the patient tone of someone explaining simple facts to a child. "The irony here, Officer Mitchell, is that you've just committed a federal crime against the person who decides whether your department continues to exist." Chief Harrison was fumbling with his radio, his voice cracking as he called for immediate backup and supervisors. "All units, priority 1. We have a federal incident at 1247 Maple Street. I need every supervisor on duty here now." The black SUVs had disgorged their occupants, serious men and women in dark suits who moved with the purposeful efficiency of federal agents. They approached the scene with the calm authority of people accustomed to fixing very expensive mistakes. David looked up at Mitchell, who was standing frozen in disbelief. "Officer Mitchell, I'd like you to meet my security detail. They've been tracking my location since the moment you detained me. Right about now, they're wondering why I haven't checked in." One of the federal agents approached Harrison. "Chief Harrison, Agent Jennifer Cross, Pentagon Security. We're here to escort Colonel Sterling back to base for immediate debriefing on this security incident." Mitchell finally found his voice, but it came out as a strangled whisper. "Security incident?" David's smile was cold and professional. "Officer Mitchell, when you detain a Pentagon official with my clearance level, it automatically triggers a federal investigation. Your actions in the last hour have been recorded, documented, and forwarded to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division." The phone in Maya's hand crackled to life again. This time it was a different voice, deeper, more authoritative. "Dr. Sterling? This is General Marcus Webb, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Is Colonel Sterling safe?" Mitchell's knees buckled. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was personally involved. The man he'd been calling boy and you people had the chairman of the Joint Chiefs on speed dial. David stood up slowly, the handcuffs still binding his wrists. "General Webb, I'm secure. However, I believe this incident requires immediate review at the highest levels." As federal agents moved to unlock his restraints, David looked directly at Mitchell one final time. "Officer Mitchell, you wanted to know who I really am? I'm Colonel David Sterling, and I've just decided that your department's federal funding is under immediate review." The power had shifted completely. The hunter had become the hunted. The metallic click of handcuffs being removed echoed across the suddenly silent street. David rubbed his wrists where the restraints had been, his movements calm and deliberate as Agent Cross stepped back respectfully. The federal agents formed a protective perimeter around him, their presence transforming the entire dynamic of the scene. Mitchell stood frozen, his face cycling through disbelief, panic, and dawning horror. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool afternoon air. "Sir, there's been a misunderstanding," he stammered, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "I was just responding to a call. I didn't know. Nobody told me." David's voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to briefing senators and cabinet members. "Officer Mitchell, there was no misunderstanding. You saw a black man in an affluent neighborhood and decided he didn't belong." Chief Harrison was frantically working his radio, trying to manage the rapidly expanding crisis. "Dispatch, I need the mayor on the line immediately. Also contact City Legal." His hands shook as he realized his department had just committed what could be construed as an act against a Pentagon official. "Chief Harrison," Agent Cross interrupted, her voice professionally neutral. "Colonel Sterling's incident report will be filed within the hour. The Department of Justice has been notified." The words hit Harrison like physical blows. FBI involvement meant federal oversight and potential loss of funding. His department's $50 million annual budget was now in jeopardy because of one officer's racism. Mitchell's desperation became palpable. He dropped to one knee beside David, his voice pleading. "Colonel Sterling, sir, please. I have kids. I have a mortgage. I was just doing my job." David looked down at him with the same expression he might use when reviewing a failed military operation. "Officer Mitchell, your job was to serve and protect. Instead, you chose to humiliate a father in front of his daughter." Sarah had emerged from the house still wearing her birthday crown. She approached her father cautiously, her young mind struggling to process the complete reversal of power. "Daddy, are the bad policemen going away now?" she asked, her voice small but clear. David knelt to her level, his voice gentle. "Yes, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay now." Mitchell's face crumpled as the full weight of his actions hit him. He'd terrorized a child and destroyed his own career in 30 minutes. "Please, sir, I'll do anything. Community service, sensitivity training, whatever you want." Rodriguez stepped forward, his own panic evident. "Colonel Sterling, sir, I was following Officer Mitchell's lead. If I had known your identity." David's response was cutting. "Sergeant Rodriguez, my identity shouldn't matter. The Constitution applies to everyone." Agent Cross approached with a tablet. "Colonel Sterling, we need your statement for the federal incident report. This will be forwarded to the Pentagon and DOJ." The mention of federal agencies sent another wave of terror through the assembled officers. Mitchell realized he wasn't just facing termination, he was facing federal prosecution. Chief Harrison made his decision with the desperation of a man watching his career implode. "Officer Mitchell, you're suspended without pay, effective immediately. Badges and weapons now." Mitchell's hands shook as he removed his badge, the small piece of metal seeming to weigh 1,000 pounds. "Chief, please." "Officer Pierce," Harrison continued, "you're suspended pending investigation for failure to intervene in civil rights violations." Pierce started to protest, but Harrison cut her off. "The body cam footage shows you witnessed everything and said nothing." Maya approached the group, her phone still in hand. "General Washington wants to speak with whoever's in charge," she announced, extending the device toward Harrison. The chief's face went white as he accepted the phone. "This is Chief Harrison." The voice on the other end was crisp and unforgiving. "Chief Harrison, this is Brigadier General Patricia Washington. Your officers just detained the Pentagon official responsible for your counterterrorism funding." Harrison's voice was barely audible. "Yes, General, we're handling the situation." "No, Chief Harrison, we're handling the situation now. Your department is under federal review." As Harrison hung up, he turned to see news vans pulling up. Social media had done its work. #Pentagon Dad was trending nationally. David straightened his polo shirt and looked around at the chaos Mitchell's racism had created. Federal agents, suspended officers, panicked administrators, and a ruined birthday party. "Officer Mitchell," he said finally, "you wanted to know if I belonged in this neighborhood. I belong wherever my service to this country takes me." 3 weeks later, the FBI Civil Rights Division had transformed a simple birthday party incident into the most comprehensive police misconduct investigation in the state's history. Special Agent Maria Santos sat across from David in a sterile conference room, surrounded by boxes of evidence that painted a devastating picture of systemic racism. "Colonel Sterling, what we've uncovered goes far beyond Officer Mitchell's actions that day," Agent Santos explained, sliding a thick folder across the table. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across documents that would destroy careers. David opened the folder, his military training allowing him to process the damning statistics without visible emotion. 47 documented incidents of racial bias in Mitchell's record, 32 complaints dismissed without investigation, 15 lawsuits settled quietly by the city. The evidence was overwhelming. Mitchell's body camera footage from previous encounters revealed a pattern of behavior that made David's treatment look restrained. Traffic stops that lasted hours for minor infractions, searches conducted without consent, language that would make a sailor blush, all directed at Black and Hispanic citizens. "The most disturbing part," Agent Santos continued, "is the departmental cover-up. Chief Harrison knew about these complaints for years. The city paid out $2.3 million in settlements over the past 5 years, all with non-disclosure agreements." David's phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "CNN wants an interview at 4 p.m. The Pentagon cleared it." The story had exploded beyond local news, becoming a national symbol of everyday racism. #Justice for David had generated over 2 million tweets. The investigation revealed institutional rot that went to the very top. Mayor Patricia Coleman had personally intervened to suppress previous complaints against Mitchell, viewing him as an effective deterrent against undesirable elements moving into affluent neighborhoods. "We've identified 17 other victims willing to testify," Agent Santos said, her voice carrying prosecutorial satisfaction. Dr. Marcus Thompson pulled over 6 times in 2 years while driving through his own neighborhood. Maria Gonzalez, detained for suspicious behavior while jogging. Professor James Wilson, handcuffed in front of his students during a museum field trip. Each name represented a life disrupted, a family traumatized. David realized his experience wasn't unique. It was simply the first time someone with real power had been targeted. The federal grand jury had been meeting for 2 weeks. Today, they would hand down indictments. David sat in the witness room preparing to testify about not just his own experience, but the broader implications when law enforcement could target Pentagon personnel with impunity. "Colonel Sterling?" A court clerk appeared. "The grand jury is ready for your testimony." David entered the chamber where 23 citizens sat in judgment. Their faces reflected the diversity Mitchell despised. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, young and old, united in their commitment to justice. "Ladies and gentlemen," David began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who briefed world leaders, "I'm Colonel David Sterling. I'm here not just as a victim, but as a Pentagon official who witnessed a fundamental breakdown in the rule of law." His testimony was devastating in its precision. He detailed every moment, every racial slur, every constitutional violation. But more importantly, he connected it to larger issues of national security and public trust. When law enforcement can detain federal officials based solely on racial prejudice, David explained, it represents a threat to constitutional order itself. If a Pentagon colonel can be handcuffed in his own driveway, what protection do ordinary citizens have? The grand jury deliberated for 47 minutes. When they emerged, the foreman's voice was clear. "We find probable cause for federal civil rights violations against Officer Bradley Mitchell, Sergeant Anthony Rodriguez, and Chief Harold Harrison." The indictments were unsealed an hour later, sending shockwaves through law enforcement. Mitchell faced 8 federal charges, including deprivation of rights under color of law and conspiracy. Rodriguez and Harrison faced conspiracy charges for covering up Mitchell's abuse pattern. The Pentagon announced that David's case would become the foundation for new federal guidelines protecting government employees from discriminatory law enforcement. The Sterling Protocol would require immediate federal notification whenever federal employees above certain security clearances were detained. David stood on courthouse steps as reporters surged forward, microphones thrust toward his face. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across marble columns, creating a dramatic backdrop for this national moment of reckoning. "Colonel Sterling, how do you feel about the indictments?" shouted a CNN reporter. David's response was measured and powerful. "Justice delayed is justice denied, but justice achieved changes everything. These indictments send a clear message that no one is above the law, not police officers who abuse authority, not supervisors who cover up misconduct." Behind him, Maya stood with Sarah, now 9 and articulate about the experience that changed their family. When a reporter asked what she wanted people to know, Sarah stepped to the microphone. "My daddy is a hero who protects our country," she said clearly. "The police were mean to him because of his skin color, but that doesn't make him less of a hero." The trials continued for months, but outcomes were never in doubt. Mitchell received 11 years in federal prison, 8 for civil rights violations and 3 for obstruction when investigators discovered he'd deleted body camera footage from previous encounters. Rodriguez got 4 years for conspiracy and was permanently banned from law enforcement. Harrison received 6 years and forfeited his pension, dying financially and professionally ruined. The city paid $4.2 million to the Sterling family, but more importantly, agreed to comprehensive police reform under federal oversight. The Willowbrook Heights Police Department was disbanded and rebuilt from scratch, with David serving as advisor on new training protocols. As David watched Mitchell being led away in handcuffs, experiencing for the first time the humiliation he'd inflicted on others, he felt not triumph, but a profound sense that the system could work when good people refused to accept injustice. The real victory wasn't prison sentences or money. It was knowledge that Sarah would grow up in a world slightly more just than the one that traumatized her on her 8th birthday. Justice had been served, but the work of building a better America continued. 6 months later, David stood at the podium of the Police Training Academy, his brigadier general stars gleaming under the bright lights. The promotion had come with his new role as special advisor to the president on police reform, a position created specifically to address the systemic issues his case had exposed. "Change doesn't happen overnight," David said, addressing the graduating class of 127 new officers. "But it starts with one person willing to stand up and say, 'This is wrong.'" His voice carried across the silent auditorium where body cameras now recorded every training session as part of the new transparency protocols. In the front row sat Officer Janet Pierce, no longer the rookie who'd stood silently while her partner terrorized a family. She'd become the department's first community relations coordinator, her transformation from bystander to advocate serving as proof that people could choose redemption over complicity. The Sterling Protocol had been implemented in 847 police departments nationwide, creating a direct line between federal employees and Pentagon security whenever local law enforcement interactions occurred. 3 other incidents had already been prevented, careers saved, and communities protected from the kind of trauma David's family had endured. Sarah, now 9, sat in the Academy's visitor section with Maya, both wearing matching Justice for All t-shirts that had become symbols of the movement. Sarah had grown from a traumatized birthday girl into a confident young advocate who spoke at schools about standing up to bullies, whether they wore badges or backpacks. 6 months ago, I was handcuffed in my own driveway because Officer Bradley Mitchell saw my skin color before my character," David continued. His words met with absolute silence from the cadets. "Today, Mitchell is serving 11 years in federal prison, not because of who I am, but because of what he chose to do." The statistics spoke for themselves. Bias complaints had dropped 94% in departments implementing Sterling Protocol training. Federal oversight had led to $127 million in civil rights settlements nationwide, but more importantly, it had prevented countless other families from experiencing what the Sterlings endured. Maya had channeled her anger into action, establishing the Sterling Foundation for Medical Professionals Against Racism. The organization trained healthcare workers to recognize and combat discrimination in medical settings, understanding that prejudice infected every corner of American society, not just law enforcement. The Willowbrook Heights neighborhood had undergone its own transformation. Mrs. Grayson, the neighbor whose call had started everything, had suffered a stroke 3 months after the incident. Maya, despite everything, had been the surgeon who saved her life, an act of grace that spoke volumes about the difference between justice and revenge. "The question isn't whether racism exists," David said, looking directly into the camera that broadcast his speech live to millions. "We have video proof. The question is what we're going to do about it." Behind the podium, a banner displayed the Academy's new motto, "Service without prejudice, protection without exception." It had replaced the old slogan that spoke of protecting and serving, because as David had learned, those words meant nothing without the commitment to apply them equally. Mitchell's cell in federal prison had become a cautionary tale throughout the law enforcement community. His appeals had been denied, his wife had divorced him, and his children had changed their last name. He served as a reminder that there were consequences for turning badges into weapons of oppression. The documentary about David's case, Pentagon Dad, had won 3 Emmy Awards and sparked congressional hearings that led to the Police Accountability Act of 2025. The legislation mandated federal oversight for any department with patterns of civil rights violations, funded by redirected military surplus programs. David's closing words resonated across the Academy and beyond. "We're all neighbors in America. We all deserve to feel safe in our communities, whether we're celebrating a child's birthday or simply trying to live peacefully. That's not a political statement, it's a moral imperative." As he stepped down from the podium, Sarah ran to hug him, her birthday crown replaced by a confident smile that spoke to the resilience of children and the power of justice properly applied. The audience rose in thunderous applause, but David's attention focused on his daughter's whispered words. "Daddy, I'm proud of you for making the bad policemen learn to be good." Sometimes the most profound truths came from the mouths of children. The hashtag #Sterling Protocol trended globally as David's speech was shared millions of times. Comments poured in from parents, activists, and citizens who finally saw proof that the system could change when people with power chose to use it responsibly. The work wasn't finished, might never be finished, but progress was undeniable. In a nation still grappling with its original sins, the Sterling family had proven that individual courage could spark institutional change. Justice wasn't just an abstract concept anymore. It was a living, breathing reality that grew stronger every time someone chose to do what was right instead of what was easy. Share this story if you believe justice should be colorblind. Subscribe for more stories of courage overcoming prejudice. And remember, we all have the power to stand up when we see injustice, even when it's uncomfortable. What kind of America do you want your children to inherit?
The story you heard today wasn't cleaned up. It was told exactly as it happened. At Black Voices Uncut, we believe that's the only way truth can live. If you felt something, hit like, comment, and your reaction, and subscribe. Every week, we bring you voices that refuse to be silenced.